So, in their first playoff series ever at the end of their second season of existence, the Seattle Kraken defeat the Colorado Avalanche in 7 games, and now get to do it all over again against the Dallas Stars. Welcome back, everybody, for a quick-ish, anyway, preview of this round 2 matchup for the Kraken against the Dallas Stars. And since we already know my track record of trying to be quick with these videos, not being particularly good, and with this series already starting right away on Tuesday, well, we better get right to it. Right out of the gate, gotta be honest, once again, I am picking against the Kraken, as I think the Stars will come away with this series. And even my bracket before these playoffs started, well, for one, I was perfect in the West in the first round, down to the number of games each team would win in. So there's absolutely no way, even a possibility, that I could be wrong about this series. Just not possible. It's a foregone conclusion because of my bracket that the Stars will win. You hear that, Fate? You feeling tempted yet? Okay, yes, obviously, with the Kraken having spent the entire regular season proving everybody wrong to make it to the playoffs in the first place, and then continuing that trend by upsetting the Avalanche again in the first round, there is a perfectly good chance that they could keep that trend going by defeating the Stars in the second round to advance to the conference final. But since every time I pick against them, they prove me wrong, and heck, in the inaugural season, I picked them to make the playoffs, and they proved me wrong in a less fun way that season, I might as well just keep picking whatever the opposite of what I want to have happen be the thing that actually happens, because even though I did, when it came to my bracket, pick the Kraken in the first round in 7, as I said in that preview video for the Avalanche series, if I had to bet on it, I would have picked the Avalanche in 6 going in. So I honestly would kind of come to the same conclusion with this one. I think the Kraken will put up a fight, probably win too, but I'll say Stars in 6 if I had to bet on it. Again, obviously hoping that I'm wrong. That said, well, it's true, the Stars aren't the defending champs. In fact, they got knocked out in the first round of last year's playoffs. And yes, the Avalanche did finish with a better record in the regular season. There's a reason that when it came to the start of these playoffs, I picked the Stars to come out of the West. Because honestly, I think this is the best, most well-rounded team in these playoffs, at least on the western side of the bracket. And when it comes to the Kraken specifically and how they match up against the Stars, well, with the Avalanche, that series, even with the Avalanche being the defending champs and deserved favorites going into it, I did think that there were some parts of that series that matched up well for the Kraken. And while there are a couple here and there against the Stars, there are definitely not as many matchups or aspects of this matchup that I think favor the Kraken, and quite a few more that seem to point towards the Stars being the favorites. And unfortunately, that even starts when it comes to the strengths for the Kraken when it came to finding success in the regular season, specifically with their offense and ability to put pucks in the net. Because, well, like we mentioned going into the Avalanche series, in spite of the fact that the Kraken didn't get a ton of shots on goal over the course of the season, and their expected goals as a result weren't fantastic, they were 4th in the league when it came to goals for per game, and 1st when it came to 5-on-5 goals. However, in all 4 of those categories on the other side, the Stars were top 10 and 3rd best at keeping the puck out of their net in the NHL in the regular season. Now, Kraken fans can take a little bit of solace in the fact that the Kraken still managed to score 10 goals across those 3 games, even if they only managed to win one of them in overtime, going 1-1-1 in that series, losing both of the 2 games at home, 1 in overtime and 1 in regulation. But with that high shooting percentage that the Kraken had over the course of the season that finished the year 2nd in the NHL, they were still able to get enough into the Dallas net that if they can keep up that pace in the playoffs, might lead to some success. They are probably going to have to get more shots on goal in the playoffs if they want to find anywhere near that 3.3 goals per game that they found in those 3 matchups in the regular season. Especially considering when it came at least to the first round against an Avalanche team who, in the regular season, wasn't as great statistically defensively, still above average, but nowhere near as good as the Stars were. The Kraken had a shooting percentage 3% lower than what they had in the regular season. That put them 5th worst out of the 16 teams in round 1. Of course, clearly the Kraken still overcame that lower shooting percentage in the first round to still end up winning it, but if they get fewer shots on goal like they got against the Stars in those 3 games, and also have that lower shooting percentage like they had in the first round, it's going to be really tough to come by enough goals to end up winning 4 games in this series. As we know, though, there are things the Kraken can do to try to bring that shooting percentage back up from where it was in round 1. Even if, honestly, I thought the Kraken did a pretty good job of taking advantage of the weak spot in Georgiev and the Avalanche defense on that glove side, peppering it with shots. And when they scored, a fair number of those goals did go in past the glove of Georgiev. For the Stars, though, well, it might be a little bit trickier because while with the Avalanche, they tended to give up a lot more shots from that glove side. And Georgiev, again, his save percentage was a little bit lower there. For the Stars, there's a little bit more of a mismatch where defensively, once again, it lines up with the Kraken's offense where a lot of those shots could come from the glove side, especially along the boards on the outside. But when it comes to if there is a weak spot in Ottinger, it seems like that might be more at the low part of the faceoff circle on the blocker side, which then definitely becomes an issue where that's the hot spot for one Jared McCann. And if the Kraken are still missing McCann for a majority of this series, especially the first few games, as would be the case, they could really miss his offensive production from that spot where the save percentage is a little bit lower for Ottinger, and there are not a lot of spots where that's the case. Now, even without McCann, there still is Daniel Sprong that likes to shoot from that spot, as well as at times Vince Dunn, so it's not that the Kraken don't have guys that can score from there, and it's not like that's the only place they can score from. But when it comes to finding weak spots, especially against a Dallas defense that doesn't have a lot of them, and a goaltender in Ottinger who himself is one of the better goaltenders in these playoffs, you're going to have to try and find those weaker spots if they exist and take advantage of them. Meanwhile, at the other end of the ice, things don't get much easier where, although again, the Kraken over the course of the regular season were fantastic at limiting shots, as we mentioned before in the Avalanche preview, second best in the NHL when it came to shots allowed, as well as second best when it came to expected goals allowed at 5-on-5. The Kraken, when it came to that first round against the Avalanche, it seemed like that all immediately went out the window, as although the Kraken did a pretty good job of keeping shots to the outside, they did let a lot of shots on Grubauer, by the end of it allowing the second most shots in the first round of any of the 16 teams, completely flying in the face of what happened in the regular season with that determined first line and even second line of the Avalanche. And when it comes to the Stars, although, like the Avalanche, they might not have the best scoring depth when it comes to lines 3 and 4, and their top end, even if Stars fans might argue with me on this, I don't think is quite to the same level of the Avalanche top end. This is still definitely not the Stars team of years past that had trouble scoring. This is a Stars team that can definitely put the puck in the back of the net. Because although when it came to shots on goal, 5-on-5 goals, and expected 5-on-5 goals, the Stars were worse than the Avalanche over the course of the season, even with the Avalanche injuries. When it came to actual goals for per game, they still finished 7th in the NHL over the course of the season, thanks in large part to the breakout season of Jason Robertson, who, even if he isn't Nathan MacKinnon, can definitely take advantage of holes in defense and any extra space if he's given it. Plus, just like MacKinnon had Rantanen and Lehkonen, who both also managed to produce in that first round series, Robertson has Rope Hintz, who was fantastic against the Wild in round 1, as well as a resurgent Jamie Benn. And even on the blue line, just like the Avalanche had their young star in Makar, Dallas has their own star, no pun intended, in Miro Heiskanen. Now, yes, I don't think it's a stretch to say that Makar is still better than Heiskanen, but honestly, I think Heiskanen has a chance to have more of an impact in round 2 than Makar had in round 1, due to the fact that it seemed pretty clear to me at least that Makar was still kind of losing a step to whatever that lower body injury was that kept him out right up until the start of the playoffs, and honestly, if it was still more regular season, I don't know that he would have kept playing. Again, he didn't really seem fully himself, and the Kraken did get a step on him a couple of times and were able to find the back of the net off of it. I mean, heck, even the game winner in Game 7 for Bjorkstrand, he managed to get off just a step before Makar got to him to block that shot, and if Makar is that step faster, fully recovered 100%, he might get there in time to prevent Bjorkstrand from getting off that shot and putting the Kraken up 2-0. Now, the good news here for the Kraken is that defensively, they kind of already have the template of how to find success here in round 2 against the Stars, because honestly, it's pretty much the same as what they did in round 1 against the Avalanche. And it all starts with shutting down that top line and making it hard, first of all, for them to transition into the offensive end. And although we know they'll probably spend more time in the offensive end than not, making sure that while they're there, any chances that they do get are kept to the outside. And even at that, frustrating them along the boards and making them go in and out of the offensive end as much as possible, not allowing those stays to be particularly long. Again, obviously, you'd like to give up fewer shots than the Kraken gave up in round 1, but as long as they can keep those shots to the outside and not too many of those high danger areas, especially in the slot, then the Kraken might be able to find some success. But that is really going to be a key, because when it comes to the areas that overlap the most when it comes to where the Stars like to score from and where the Kraken in general have had hard times keeping the puck out of the net from, well, it lines up right down the middle, right in that slot. And that's not just true at 5-on-5. The Stars, when it comes to their power play, have also found the most of their success right down the middle of the ice. So, one more time, when the puck does find its way into the Kraken end, which we know it's going to, the more the Kraken can keep play along the boards while it's there, the better. And that'll also give Grubauer the best chance to make any saves, and if he keeps playing the way in this series that he did in round 1, and the Kraken can keep those shots to the outside, then maybe, just maybe, the Kraken can make this Stars offense look like the Stars offense that we've seen in years past. Oh, and yes, obviously, part of keeping shots to the outside means that even if you do let those shots in, you've got to make sure that the area around the net is also clean and there isn't too much net front presence allowed by the Stars, or by the Kraken for the Stars. Now, since I did just briefly bring up the Stars power play, and we've already talked about offense and defense, at least briefly, we might as well move on to special teams, and this is where things really start to lean towards the Stars, as both of their special teams units, power play and penalty kill, were top 5 in the league over the course of the regular season. And as we already know with the Kraken special teams, well, over the course of the regular season, both were below average. Of course, as we've talked about, this penalty kill for the Kraken, that's only really the case because of the dreadful start to the season, and since mid-January on, it's been one of the best penalty kills in the NHL, and perhaps even more importantly, just got done shutting out one of the other best power plays in the league over the course of the regular season in the Avalanche, killing off 16 of 18 power plays that the Avalanche had over the course of the 7 games. Plus, it also goes a bit in Seattle's favor here with the special teams, that as we get deeper into the playoffs, the whistles get swallowed more and more by the officials, and we'll see, hopefully anyway, fewer and fewer penalties being called. And again, to go back real quick to the matchup of the Kraken penalty kill versus Stars power play, I do think it favors the Kraken where the two teams have been strong, because the Kraken penalty kill has done a really good job over the course of the season of keeping things to the outside, and while they've let up a lot of one-timers from the face-off circles, that really hasn't been the place that this Stars power play has been scoring from, as again, their strength has been pretty much right down the middle, if not leaned a little bit to the blocker side. And the Kraken really have not allowed a ton of attempts from those areas, or at least goals anyway. But undoubtedly, the place that the Stars have the biggest advantage over the Kraken coming into this series is when it comes to faceoffs, where the Kraken were, as we know, second worst in the NHL over the course of the regular season, and that did not get better against another team that struggled in the faceoff circle in that first round against the Avalanche. And now as they go on to face the Stars, well, the Stars aren't just one of the best teams in the faceoff circle, they are the best team when it comes to winning faceoffs, at least over the course of the regular season. So the Kraken are gonna have to plan for losing a lot of faceoffs, especially in their end of the ice. And while in the preview of the Avalanche, I didn't think that faceoffs were going to play a big role, we saw, at least early on in the series, that turned out not to be the case, as the Avalanche scored 3 of their first 4, and maybe even 4 of their first 6 goals of the series directly off of faceoffs that they won in the Kraken end of the ice. The Kraken did a decent job of cleaning that up a bit over the rest of the series, and they're going to have to figure out a way to have plans for when they lose faceoffs in their end of the ice if they don't want that trend to pick right back where it left off at the start of that series in the start of this one. Oh, and yes, I did also throw up the numbers for block shots and hits per game between these two teams over the course of the season and where that ranked. It's somewhat similar there from the Avalanche series, where at least coming into the playoffs, neither one of these teams blocked a ton of shots or laid a ton of hits, but it's the playoffs, and we know both of those things change, even on top of being somewhat subjectively measured over the course of the season in the first place. So with all that having been said, when it comes to keys for the Kraken in this series and what they can do to try to win it and move on to the conference final, well, it's a lot of the same things that they did in round 1 to get to this spot in the first place. Defensively, we've already talked about it. It's going to come down to probably that Yanni Gourde line again with Bjorkstrand and Tolvanen, and how well they can shut down this first line in particular of the Stars and prevent them from taking over games. Again, you'd have to think that they'll probably manage to take over at least one of the games of this series and steal one in that way. Maybe even two, but if the Gord line and the Kraken in general can keep them from getting too carried away, then it at least sets them up to find success and do it enough at the other end of the ice to come away with some wins. And when it comes to how the Kraken can find that success at the other end of the ice, well, for one, getting more shots on goal would be nice, and picking your spots a little bit better, getting that shooting percentage back up. But the real key, once again, is going to be depth. The Avalanche didn't get a single goal from their bottom six. And in fact, when it comes to point scoring in general from forwards by the Avalanche in round one, outside of McKinnon, Rantanen, and Lehkonen, the Avalanche only got 9 points total from the rest of their forwards. Meanwhile, for the Kraken, well, they had nobody in the same hemisphere as far as points are concerned with those top three of the Avs. They had 15 different goal scorers in that series, and just like they did in the regular season, killed the Avalanche with their depth and scoring from all up and down the lineup, really taking advantage of those times where that first line wasn't out on the ice. And if they can do the same thing in this series against the Stars, they might be able to find that same level of success. Though, admittedly, it would be nice if, say, the Beniers line, for example, were to start scoring a little bit more than they did in the first round, and obviously, part of that would be, it would be nice to see McCann come back sooner rather than later, though the Stars aren't perfectly healthy either, as they lost Pavelski in the first round, and we don't know for sure when or if he's coming back. And yes, that scoring depth that the Kraken have over the Stars is consistent back to even the performance in the regular season, where the Stars only had 8 players with 30 points or more in the regular season, while the Kraken had 13. And when it came to 10 or more goal scorers, the Stars only had 9 there, and the Kraken again, the number's 13 there as well, even if they're missing, 2 of them to injury at the moment. And finally, obviously the biggest key for either of these teams, and really any team in the playoffs, is goaltending. For the Kraken, they're going to need Grubauer to show up just like he did against his old team, against a team that he never played for. Whether or not that same energy and same Grubauer shows up, we'll have to see. For now, all we can go on is what we've seen so far, and so far, playoff Grubauer has been an entirely different beast to what we've seen all the way up until this point through his Kraken career. Honestly, he's played better in these playoffs than he's really ever played as far as I can remember, even through having watched him with the Avalanche before the Kraken got started. Of course, though, as I already alluded to earlier, the Kraken are just as much up against it at the other end of the ice, as while Grubauer was fantastic in round one, stealing that series for the Kraken, there were 2 goaltenders by save percentage that were better than Grubauer in round one, and only one of them that's still in the playoffs. That one guy is Ottinger at the other end of the ice against the Kraken in this series. And when it comes to that, the Kraken are going to have to hope that the extra couple of days off for the Stars allowed him to cool off a bit, as he is coming into this series hot, having only allowed 3 goals in the last 3 games of their series win over the Wild. And for that matter, only 1 goal in the last 2 games. With that though, let me know what you think down in the comment section. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this series, what you think some of the keys for either team are going to be to try and win it. Outside of goaltending, I think we can all point to goaltending as a obvious key for either team. Big matchups to watch again is going to be that Kraken third line versus the first line for the Stars, and then what the Kraken can do with their depth to take advantage of the bottom 6 of Dallas. Only time will tell though, and that time is coming up pretty quick here, starting on Tuesday. Today as of when you're watching this. So until that start of game 1 coming up here in a little bit, which again we'll be streaming for here on the channel, both games 1 and 2 on the road, and then 5 and 7 if necessary. If you haven't made it to this point, thank you very much for watching. If you did like or enjoy this video, buttons for that kind of stuff down below help support the channel, so I'd appreciate you using them. And until game 1, stay safe out there, be good to each other, God bless, and go Kraken!